What do you do when the government stops serving the citizens? Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening from wherever you're watching or listening. My name is Caleb Glick. I'm a lawyer here in the great state of Texas with the Calhoun School of Law to bring you a lot of information that plenty of bad folks would rather you not have. For today's lecture, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be going over the founding document of my wonderful state, Texas, the Texas Declaration of Independence. And we're going to read through it because a lot of the principles, a lot of the ideas that it espouses are very similar to what the U.S. Declaration of Independence espoused. And the reason we're going over these documents is to demonstrate to you the universal approval of not only the founding generation, but of self-evident truths that whenever a government becomes destructive of its sole purpose, that being protecting the citizens' exercise of their God-given rights, that it's not an all-for-naught, throw your hands up and surrender moment for the citizenry. Rather, it is an obligation or a duty, to use the Declaration of Independence own words, duty of the citizens to reform or completely abolish that government and institute a new government for those ends of protecting the citizens' exercise of their God-given rights. So let's go ahead and jump on over to the Texas Declaration of Independence. It is titled The Unanimous Declaration of Independence made by the delegates of the people of Texas in General Convention at the town of Washington on the 2nd day of March, 1836. Again, as we read through more and more of these documents, I've got another document titled the Declaration of Principles that was published and ratified by New York in 1775. And a lot of the ideas that it shows and demonstrates are similar to the U.S. Declaration of Independence. The point being of all of these different documents is to illustrate to you the exact foundation that all of these original preceding thinkers or predecessor thinkers were applying whenever they were going about reforming or instituting new governments for the sake of themselves, for the sake of their sovereignty and posterity. So that way we don't just go shooting in the dark thinking, well, we can do whatever is whatever because it's the lesser of two evils or the better of two options. No, there is an ultimate objective, and that objective is explicitly stated in documents such as this. So, apologies for interjecting, just wanted to clarify that further. Let's get back to the Texas Declaration of Independence. It says, when a government has ceased to protect the lives, liberty, and property of the people from whom its legitimate powers are derived. So what does that sound like? The just powers of any government are derived from the consent of the governed. And for the advancement of whose happiness it was instituted, and so far from being a guarantee for the enjoyment of those inestimable and inalienable rights, becomes an instrument in the hands of evil rulers for their oppression. When the Federal Republican Constitution, and it's not talking about the U.S. Constitution, it's talking about the Mexican Constitution of 1824. Mexico was actually a confederation. It was a union, much like the U.S., before Santa Anna tried to do what he did. And ultimately did what he did, but didn't successfully conquer Texas. When the Federal Republican Constitution of their country, which they have sworn to support, no longer has a substantial existence, and the whole nature of their government has been forcibly changed without their consent, from a restricted federative republic composed of sovereign states to a consolidated central military despotism in which every interest is in which every interest is disregarded, but that of the army and the priesthood, both the eternal enemies of civil liberty, the ever-ready minions of power, and the usual instruments of tyrants, when long after the spirit of the Constitution has departed, moderation is, at length, so far lost by those in power that even the semblance of freedom is removed, and the forms themselves of the Constitution discontinued. And so far from their petitions and remonstrances being regarded, the agents who bear them are thrown into dungeons, and mercenary armies sent forth to force a new government upon them at the point of the bayonet. When, in consequence of such acts of malfeasance and abdication on the part of the government, anarchy prevails, and civil society is dissolved into its original elements. In such a crisis, the first law of nature, the right of self-preservation, the inherent and inalienable rights of the people to appeal to first principles and take their political affairs into their own hands in extreme cases, enjoins it as a right towards themselves and a sacred obligation to their posterity to abolish such government and create another, in its stead, calculated to rescue them from impending dangers and to secure their future welfare and happiness. Nations, as well as individuals, are amenable for their acts to the public opinion of mankind. A statement of a part of our grievances is therefore submitted to an impartial world, in justification of the hazardous but unavoidable step now taken of severing our political connection with the Mexican people and assuming an independent attitude among the nations of the earth. The Mexican government, by its colonization laws, invited and induced the Anglo-American population of Texas to colonize its wilderness under the pledged faith of a written constitution that they should continue to enjoy that constitutional liberty and republican government to which they had been habituated in the land of their birth, the United States of America. In this expectation, they have been cruelly disappointed, inasmuch as the Mexican nation has acquiesced in the late changes made in the government by General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, who, having overturned the constitution of his country, now offers us the cruel alternative, either to abandon our homes, acquired by so many privations, or submit to the most intolerable of all tyranny, the combined despotism of the sword and the priesthood. It has sacrificed our welfare to the state of Coahuila, by which our interests have been continually depressed through a jealous and partial course of legislation carried on at a far distant seat of government by a hostile majority in an unknown tongue. And this too, notwithstanding, we have petitioned in the humblest terms for the establishment of a separate state government, and have, in accordance with the provisions of the National Constitution, presented to the General Congress a Republican Constitution which was without just cause contemptuously rejected. It incarcerated in a dungeon for a long time one of our citizens for no other cause but a zealous endeavor to procure the acceptance of our Constitution and the establishment of a state government. It has failed and refused to secure on a firm basis the right of trial by jury, that palladium of civil liberty and only safe guarantee for the life, liberty, and property of the citizen. It has failed to establish any public system of education, although possessed of almost boundless resources, the public domain, and although it is an axiom in political science that unless a people are educated and enlightened, it is idle to expect the continuance of civil liberty, or the capacity for self-government. It has suffered the military commandants stationed among us to exercise arbitrary acts of oppression and tyranny, thus trampling upon the most sacred rights of the citizen and rendering the military superior to the civil power. It has dissolved by force of arms the state Congress of Coahuila in Texas and obliged our representatives to fly for their lives from the seat of government, thus depriving us of the fundamental political right of representation. It has demanded the surrender of a number of our citizens and ordered military detachments to seize and carry them into the interior for trial, in contempt of the civil authorities and in defiance of the laws and the Constitution. It has made piratical attacks upon our commerce by commissioning foreign desperadoes and authorizing them to seize our vessels and convey the property of our citizens to far distant ports for confiscation. It denies us the right of worshiping the Almighty according to the dictates of our own conscience by the support of a national religion calculated to promote the temporal interest of its human functionaries rather than the glory of the true and living God. It has demanded us to deliver up our arms, which are essential to our defense, the rightful property of freemen and formidable only to tyrannical governments. It has invaded our country, both by sea and by land, with intent to lay waste our territory and drive us from our homes, and has now a large mercenary army advancing to carry on against us a war of extermination. It has, through its emissaries, incited the merciless, savage, with the tomahawk and scalping knife, to massacre the inhabitants of our defenseless frontiers. It hath been, during the whole time of our connection with it, the contemptible sport and victim of successive military revolutions, and hath continually exhibited every characteristic of a weak, corrupt, and tyrannical government. These and other grievances were patiently borne by the people of Texas until they reached that point at which forbearance ceases to be a virtue. We then took up arms in defense of the national Constitution. We appealed to our Mexican brethren for assistance. Our appeal has been made in vain. Though months have elapsed, no sympathetic response has yet been heard from the interior. We are, therefore, forced to the melancholy conclusion that the Mexican people have acquiesced in the destruction of their liberty, and the substitution, therefore, of a military government, that they are unfit to be free and incapable of self-government. The necessity of self-preservation, therefore, now decrees our eternal political separation. We, therefore, the delegates with plenary powers of the people of Texas, in solemn convention assembled, appealing to a candid world for the necessities of our condition, do hereby resolve and declare that our political connection with the Mexican nation has forever ended, and that the people of Texas do now constitute a free, sovereign, and independent republic, and are fully invested with all the rights and attributes which properly belong to independent nations. And conscious of the rectitude of our intentions, we fearlessly and confidently commit the issue to the decision of the supreme arbiter of the destinies of nations. Signed, Richard Ellis, President of the Convention and Delegate from Red River. We have also signed Charles B. Stewart, Thomas Barnett, James Collinsworth, Edwin Waller, Asa Brigham, John S. D. Byram, Francisco Ruiz, Jose Antonio Navarro, Jesse B. Baget, William D. Lacey, William Manafee, John Fisher, Matthew Caldwell, William Motley, Lorenzo de Zavala, Stephen H. Everett, George W. Smith, Elijah Stapp, Claiborne West, William B. Skates, M. B. Menard, A. B. Hardin, J. W. Bunton, Thomas J. Gaisley, R. M. Coleman, Sterling C. Robertson, George C. Childress, Bailey Hardiman, Robert Potter, Thomas Jefferson Rusk, Charles S. Taylor, John S. Roberts, Robert Hamilton, Colin McKinney, Albert H. Latimer, James Powers, Sam Houston, David Thomas, Edward Conrad, Martin Palmer, Edward O. LeGrand, Stephen W. Blount, James Gaines, William Clark Jr., Sidney S. Pennington, William Carroll Crawford, I think that's Jonah or John Turner, Benjamin B. Goodrich, G.W. Barnett, James G. Swisher, Jesse Grimes, S. Rhodes Fisher, John W. Moore, John W. Bauer, Samuel A. Maverick, Sam P. Carson, A. Briscoe, James B. Woods, and the I think it's Testament is what that's supposed to abbreviate in the political term, H. S. Kimball as secretary to the convention. So that is all to be said in the Texas Declaration of Independence. If you have any questions about what was said in the Texas Declaration of Independence, or maybe there's a legal topic you'd like me to cover in a future lecture, go ahead and post those down in the comments, because the entire purpose of the Calhoun School of Law is to equip you with the necessary skills and information to combat any sort of lawfare that will be waged against you, your loved ones, or your hard-earned property. So please, if you have any questions at all, go ahead and post them down in the comments. Excellent. So my name is Caleb Glick. I'm a lawyer here in the great state of Texas with the Calhoun School of Law to bring you a lot of information that plenty of bad folks would rather you not have. I hope you enjoyed this lecture, and if not, while you're down in the comments, go ahead and let me know how I can do better so I can best serve that purpose of helping you. I hope y'all have a wonderful day, and until I see y'all in the next lecture for the next topic, I bid you all farewell.